Continuing on with our Flickr browser, we're now going to add code to process the data we've downloaded as JSON data. So we're actually going to take the data, convert that JSON data into Java objects that we can use throughout the program. So let's get stuck into that. Okay, continuing on, we now want to have a look at our JSON data to really find out what we want to record, what do we want to save to be used subsequently in our program. So we're going to go back to Firefox, and just looking at some of this data, there's some fields that we probably do want to store. So we want to record the title. We want to obviously record the image, which is this little one in here. Now that image there is what we're ultimately going to be displaying on our device. Let's also store the author, this guy, which is often an email address and a user or a username, but also the author ID. The reason that we might want to store the author ID is possibly to look at their account at some point down the track, and also the tags, and the link as well as a direct link to the photo as well. So we'll record that as well. So they would be the key fields that we want to record in our system. So what we'll need to know is what the property names are, so that we can subsequently access those in the Java code. So we'll come back to that when we need to anyway. And just the other important note here is that we're not going to be storing the actual image in our object. And the reason is we don't want to download any more data than we have to on a mobile device. The thing is to remember that mobile devices often, you haven't got a lot of memory to use, and you really don't want to be recording any more data than you have to. And in this case, what we're going to do is use like a much smarter process to only download the data when we need it. So the image is only going to be downloaded at the point of just before displaying it on the screen, so that we're not storing a heap of images in memory and taking up a lot of space, which may crash the app under certain circumstances on certain devices. Important consideration to keep in mind when you are developing. Perhaps if you've done any Java in any other programming language, you maybe haven't had any restrictions or any real restrictions in terms of the amount of space. There very much is a finite amount of space on a physical Android device. So you do need to keep that in mind whenever you're recording, you're storing data. What can you put off to store till later? In this case, the image is a perfect example of something that we don't want to store any more copies of it than we have to. Alright, so let's create an object that we can use to store this JSON data in. So I'll go back to Android Studio, and I'm going to create a new class, and I'm just going to call it Photo. Okay, give ourselves a bit more room there. And let's create some private variables. And title was one. Author. Author ID. Link was another one. I think we had tags as well, private string tags, M tags, and private string image as well. Okay, we're going to add a constructor, Command N or Control N, constructor, and the constructor I'm going to assume it's going to be using all those fields. I'm selecting all of them, pressing enter. There's our constructor. We will also want a getter. We don't need setters because we're going to set this up at the moment so that the only way to set a value is to use a constructor to set all values. But I'm going to go to my Command N again and select a getter and use a getter for all of them. Again, it saves you having to create quite a bit of code there. And just scrolling down to the end. And the other thing we'll do is we'll create a toString method, which we can also do automatically. Command N, toString. All the fields are selected and press enter. So you should really get into the habit of trying to use this code generator as much as possible. And you can see that saved a bunch of time just by doing something as simple as that. So there's our basic class that ultimately is going to store the data that we're getting out of the JSON data from Flickr. So next we want to create a new class that is going to start accessing that data. So we'll go back to our options again. And we're going to create a new class. We're going to call this one Get Flickr Json Data. JSON data, I should say. Now this one, unlike the Get Raw Data, which was a very generic class, which we designed to be able to just sort of access any URL, we are going to get more specific in this class. So we're going to assume that this is for Flickr and that it's processing JSON data, and so that someone calling this method is making that presumption. So what we're going to do is we're going to extend on the functionality that we've built in to the Get Raw Data class. And to do that, on the public class line, we put the words extends and get raw data. So what that's saying is that we're extending on the functionality, and we're going to be able to reuse the functionality that is in Get Raw Data in this new class. So that's a concept called inheritance. And it's really something that's very important from an object-oriented programming point of view. Don't reinvent the wheel if you don't have to. So in this case, just with that simple line there, we're now able to use all that functionality that we've already developed and extend on from that and add some extra functionality. In this case, the functionality that's going to sort of process the JSON data from the Flickr file over and above the raw data that the Get Raw Data class was returning for us. And what we're going to do is we're going to make a presumption that the calling process that's calling Get Flickr JSON Data has no concept of URLs, has no idea where the data is coming from. All they want to do is they want to access and call this class by sending some tags and telling us whether we want to search on all tags being present or one or more being present. So everything else is going to happen automatically in this class, and that's really like the concept of a black box bit of functionality, where the person calling this class has got no idea and perhaps doesn't want to know how it's created. They just want to get the data. So what we're going to do is we're going to assume the class that we've just created is going to always access the same URL, and that of course is this URL, this part here. That part there is always going to be the same. We're always going to access this particular feed. The format is always going to be JSON because we've used the word JSON in the class, so that's the format we're going to be using. And we're always going to add this parameter, I should say, to the output as well, to the URL, I should say, so that we always get it back in valid JSON format. But we're going to allow the calling process to specify the tags and also to specify the tag mode, which is this one, which controls whether items must have all the tags or any of the tags. So they'll send something just to indicate which one of those they want. And the rest is going to happen sort of auto-magically, for want of a better term, in our class. So consequently, the constructor will be certainly different this time. We won't be accepting a URL. We want to accept the actual data that the calling process is looking for. So I'm going to do a public Get Flickr JSON Data, so our constructor. We're going to look for something called search criteria. That's what's passed to us. And then a Boolean for match all. And essentially the match all, if match all is set to true, we're going to assume tag mode equals all. And if match all is set to false, we're going to assume tag mode equals any. Now, of course, this brings about a potential problem. Because we're extending on the Get Raw Data class, if we go back and have a look at the Get Raw Data class, its constructor, it's expecting us to have sent a URL. But of course, we can't initialize that constructor yet. And the reason that we can't do that yet is because we haven't got a URL at this point. We've only received the search criteria and a Boolean. So we haven't constructed and put together that URL. So consequently, we still need to initialize that super class. So to do that, we're going to do super, and we're going to pass a parameter of null. Now that's okay, because if you remember, we specifically, going back to raw data, we coded this to look for a null. So it was smart enough to know that if we got a null, for example here, if parameters passed were null, it's going to return a null anyway. So no matter what happens, it's not going to crash. It's just not going to do any processing. And of course, further on in our post execute, which will get called automatically anyway, that will be sent null, of course, because no data was processed if there wasn't a valid URL. And it will know that because this URL was null, the download status was not initialized. So we'll still know that there was a problem with initialization, and that was the reason why it didn't work, if someone accidentally calls that process before initializing it properly. So I hope that makes sense. So that's what we're doing there. We're just putting, we're initializing the constructor, which we need to do, but we still need to go a little bit further. So what we need to do at the point of receiving these parameters, search criteria and match all, we want to put together the URL that the superclass getRawData can ultimately download from. So to do that, we're going to create another method. We're going to call that method create and update URI, and it's going to accept two parameters, search criteria and match all. So we're passing the parameters we've received from the constructor directly through to that. Of course, we've got an error at the moment, and that's because we haven't written that functionality at this stage. So we need to add some class fields now. So we're going to do, first we're going to add our log tag again. That's going to be get Flickr JSON data dot class dot get simple name. We also want somewhere to store our photos. That's going to be a list of photos. The photo object we just created a second ago. We're going to call that one in photos. And we need to record the destination, the URI, which I'll talk about shortly. We're going to call that destination URI. So they're the variables we need. So let's now write this method. Fix that up. So we create this function now. Its purpose is going to be to construct that URI or URL that we need to be able to download. Okay. Now URI, by the way, stands for Uniform Resource Identifier. So in this context, we can think of them being one and the same, although a URI can actually be used to define a lot of things, not necessarily just the URL that we use on the internet. In this case, we're using the URI functionality, which I'm about to show you, to create a valid URL that we can use. It'll make more sense once you see anyway. And I don't know why I did that, so I'll just fix that. I'll fix that up. We don't need that there. We'll just remove the type. That's better. Okay, so create and update the URI. We need to use a class, or we're going to use a special class, special method in the URI class called Parse. And how it works is it enables us to define the parameters and so forth that are used in the URL, and we can construct this sort of step by step instead of having to sort of write custom code. This thing has got it built in. Like for example, if we go back and have a look at the Firefox version of the URL again, you notice, remember I talked earlier about having a question mark there and an ampersand there, those types of things, and where the data goes after the word equals and so forth. Well, that's something that you would need to know normally as a programmer, but with this class I'm about to show you, it does all of that for you automatically. It's a lot easier. So what we need to do is add some final definitions. We're going to do final string API. So we'll start off with the base URL. And that's this basic part, is this basic thing here. So that's the basic URL that we're going to use before we add any parameters to it. Okay, then we need to have a think about what are the parameters that are used. So we got final, string, well, tags parameter was one. Final string, and then tags mode was another one. Or tag mode, I should say. And format was another one. And of course that other one, the one that ultimately fixed the error that we were getting with invalid JSON, was the no Json callback param equals no Json callback. Now, just to be clear, in case you're wondering what are these, where do these come from, these are essentially these things here: tags, tag mode, format, and of course the other one was this one here, the no Json callback as well. So really we're just defining those to start with. They're ultimately going to be added to the URL that we're building. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to store what we create into m destination URL, which is our class variable. We're going to use a function called URI.parse. We're going to start with the basic class, basic URL I should say, which was of course that URL I've constructed. Then we're going to use a function called buildUpon. And we're going to start adding these parameters. We're going to do dot append parameter, append query parameter. The first one is going to be tags. So tags parameter, comma, and that we want to send the value of search criteria. We also want to append tag mode. We want to do something a little bit different here. We want to use the match all Boolean. We want to use a ternary operator. So we want to say if match all is true, we want tag mode to become all. Otherwise, we want it to become any. And that relates back to tag mode here. So either all or any. They're the two valids. Tag mode equals all or tag mode equals any. And of course what we've said earlier is match all. If someone passes true into that Boolean, that means that yes, they want all. So that's what we're doing there. Is we're sort of using a ternary operator, which is a special Java operator, to sort of say here, if match all is true, we want basically the tag mode to be all, otherwise we're going to make it any. Okay, moving it on, we now need to specify the format. And that was the format parameter. And we can hard code that in this case because it's going to be JSON every time. Then we want to append the no JSON, the no JSON callback. So it's no JSON callback, and that's a 1. And then finally, we want to finish that up with a dot build, like so. So that's how to construct the complete URL. And you can see that remembering it that way, I think is a heck of a lot easier than trying to remember to put question marks in the right places and ampersands and equals and so forth. It's doing all that for you. So it's creating that automatically for you, which is quite nice. And so we're storing that in our destination URI, which is our variable from this class, because we're going to be using that elsewhere. Then last thing we want to do, because we've set this up to return a Boolean, we're going to return m destination URI is not equal to null. So in other words, we want to return true if we actually got a valid URI or URI wasn't null, basically. So if it was null, it would come about as if for some reason there was some problem with the parameters, or we made a typo in the URL or something like that. So we can be reasonably sure that we've got a valid URL if the m destination URI isn't null. So that's what we're doing there. Okay, so next thing we need a way to invoke the download, because we're in the Flickr JSON data file and we're extending on the functionality to get raw data. So what we actually want to do is we want to download the raw data first, and only once that's been downloaded do we want to start processing that as JSON data. So to do that, we need to use the async process again, but we're going to do something a little bit different this time. We're going to do a public class, download JSON data. We're going to extend the download raw data. So we're going to use the functionality that's built in to the original get raw data class. So we're using this functionality from here that we've created in this process here in the get raw data, which is the download raw data class, sort of class that's we set up. Okay, I'm going to stop this video here and then we'll continue on with the next video.